YouTube, my name is Danica, and today I want to review the series of Unfortunate Events. So A Series of Unfortunate Events was a book series that I read some of as a kid, and I really liked them, but I kind of grew out of them before the series ended, and I wasn't sure how far I'd read up to. And I always thought it would be fun to sort of binge read them all in one go, just as like a fast, easy read. And I've been meaning to do that for years, so this December I decided why not have it be this month, and I would try to see if I could pad my reading for 2013 and maybe get to 100 books this year. So I decided to read the whole series in December, and I managed to do that. This is the last one here. I didn't read any of the extra materials this month. I didn't read the autobiography or Beatrice's letters or the kind of prequel series that's just coming out now. I'm going to read them later, but this review will just be the series by itself. The reason I liked this series as a kid is the same reason I liked the series now. It's the writing. I know that lots of people don't like it. Some people don't like the vocabulary element, but I always thought that was great because sometimes it defines a word inside the text, but sometimes it is actually just wordplay or completely misdefines the word, and you only really get the joke if you already understand the vocabulary. But even aside from that, the kind of sarcastic, bleak writing style, the little asides, and just some of the phrases and things are so good. Even this time I had to stop and just laugh at lines like, "It is usually not a good idea to put something you're allergic to in your mouth, especially if the thing you're allergic to is cats," and things like that. I just think are so funny. They're so well written. There'll be little changes to the text sometimes to fit what it's talking about. Like there's, in one of the books, they talk about deja vu, and when you flip the page, it's the exact same page again. And one of them is talking about reflections and a pond, and then part of the text is backwards so that you have to read it in a mirror. And there's also, what I don't think I noticed as a kid, there are these little references, kind of adult references, especially in Sonny's speech. Sonny is the baby. One of them was when they meet a girl who writes couplets, and Sonny immediately says Sappho, which is translated as meaning, "Oh, you enjoy poetry as well," or something like that. There's also a couple of just literary references, like one of the villains who is brainwashing them to think that everything's okay when it isn't. Their name is Orwell. And there'll be just sort of things like that that you wouldn't notice as a kid. It wouldn't feel like you're missing a joke, but if you're reading it as an adult, you kind of get the joke a little bit better and enjoy it more. I also really liked the characters in this story. There's the three kids. There's the oldest one, Violet, and then Klaus, the middle child, and Sonny the baby. So first of all, I really enjoyed that it's a female-based story. There's a balance of them, but I mean the girls do feature a little bit more heavily, and this being kind of an adventure story and how much it has to do with inventions and with figuring out mysteries and things, I thought that was a really great choice. And I thought their characterization was so good. Violet is about 14 in the book, and she is kind of an engineer. She really likes inventions, and she spends most of the books just inventing things to get them out of trouble. Klaus is a researcher, and he reads 24/7 and spends most of the books coming up with theories or formulating all the things that he had researched into useful escape strategies. And then you have Sonny the baby, which at first basically her only function is that she likes to bite things, which actually comes in handy quite a bit. But I appreciated that even though Sonny is a baby, her siblings treat her like a person, and they understand what she's saying, and they value her input. And even when all she's doing is sort of saying these words that only the two siblings can understand and biting things, she still feels like a main character. And then one of the most interesting and I think effective parts of the book is that they all grow up a little bit over the course of the series. It's I think it's sort of a year from beginning to end. Violet and Klaus do have birthdays, and you can see them getting a little bit more mature. But obviously with Sonny, it's the biggest change because she's going from a baby to a toddler. So in the really crisis parts of the book, Sonny starts to grow up more because she has to. And it sounds kind of silly to summarize, but it's actually really effective in the book because you're so used to her being this baby character that once they start aging her a little bit and once she has to be more mature in order to survive, it's really like drives the point home that things are getting darker and more serious. So I thought the three main characters were really well characterized. I did feel like the villain was flat. I'm sure that when I was reading as a kid I thought Count Olaf was really scary, but he's so goofy. It was hard to really care about him at all or be afraid of him because he just didn't seem like an actual person. And then especially the last book, they try to complicate that a little bit, but I think that it didn't really work. So when I first said that I was going to be reading this series this month, some of my friends said, I read those as a kid, but they were really repetitive and I wouldn't think I would like them now. And it's true that the first couple of books are fairly repetitive with their plots, but because I liked the writing style and I liked the characters, that was okay. About halfway through the series, though, the plots do seem to change and they get darker. I started to kind of report to my roommate what was happening at the end of the book because most of them in the first few would end with them on their way to a new guardian, and there was a little bit of hope there even though it was probably going to go wrong. The last half of the series, the end of the books get more and more dark. Like they start to end on cliffhangers where they're in even more danger than they were in the middle of the book. And it was interesting. I actually wasn't expecting it to keep ratcheting up the tension. And the plots completely change. It stops being about the guardians and it starts being about the siblings having to take care of themselves. But I think what really keeps the plot moving isn't so much the main plot as much as it is those hints that are being dropped about Lemony Snicket, because Lemony Snicket is the author, but he's also sort of his own character that does connect to the Baudelaire story. So he keeps having these little asides of, oh, this is just like this thing that happened to me, and then kind of quickly moves away from that. And towards the end of the series, you start to see how those are connecting to the Baudelaire story. It's really interesting that way, and especially the whole mystery of the VFD, of the secret organization that keeps popping up in their lives and popping up in Lemony Snicket's life. And what are they about? And I found that whole plot much more interesting than the actual story that was happening. Basically, I kept reading to get those little hints and to try to put together the story in my mind, because I knew, and it's true, that you're not going to get the full story at the end. Lemony Snicket or Daniel Handler doesn't sit you down at the last book and say, if you didn't follow the hints, this is the overall story. You're expected to just put it together, which would be especially difficult if you actually were reading them as they came out and not all in one month. So I really like that he doesn't talk down to his audience that way. Another thing I liked about this series is that it's a total bibliophiles series. Not only is Klaus always reading, but they all like books. Violet is also a big reader, and there's a different library in every book that comes up and ends up being kind of a pivotal point that saves their lives. It praises being a book lover, and I obviously really like that because I'm on BookTube, you understand. But I ended up liking this series way more than I was expecting because it actually gets much darker than I was expecting. Like, I know that it's a series of unfortunate events and I expected these things to keep happening to these characters. I wasn't expecting it to really detail this totally pessimistic worldview, especially in the last couple of books. It starts to be that the Baudelaires had to do all these things to stay alive, and they start to question whether they're any better than the villains and what is it to be a good person, and everyone in their lives keeps letting them down so that it becomes this sort of accepted fact that you just can't rely on people. In each book there's these sort of cardboard villains, but there's also these characters who seem like good people, except that they don't go the extra mile. They don't protect the Baudelaires. They are complacent, or they are too afraid, and it kind of shows it as it's not enough to just not be a villain, but you have to be actively a good person. And that doesn't really happen in the books. Even the Baudelaires, who are trying to do their best, end up thinking, am I any better than any of these people? And it's a really interesting worldview, especially to find in a kids series. Especially the last book gets so bleak that I was kind of depressed when I put it down, but also really fascinated, because it ties together this dark worldview with kind of narrative ideas. And I especially found it really interesting that in the end he says all stories are in media res, and you can never get the whole story. Everybody's stories are intersected. Everyone's going through their own struggles and their own mysteries, and you can never find out your mystery, because you would have to figure out your parents' mystery and their best friends' mysteries and their entire stories, and the world as being this interconnected mystery that is in itself a series of unfortunate events. And I found that so fascinating from both the pessimistic point and the narrative point about this kind of commentary on storytelling in general that got really meta in a way I wasn't expecting from this series. But if you can't tell, that's kind of what I liked about the books, is that they were darker and they were bigger than I was expecting. The ideas are bigger. It really seems like its own world, and like it actually has valuable things to say about ours. I really wasn't expecting to take this series this seriously. I mean, I love Harry Potter and it informs my worldview every day, but I was expecting to be able to just dismiss a series of unfortunate events as, you know, just a way to pass the time, when I actually think I'm going to try to get my own copies. These are library copies, but I think I might try to collect the series and maybe reread it again. So it wasn't all good. I do have some criticisms of it. I was bored by some of the internal plots of each book. There are a few gimmicks that Daniel Handler uses that I thought got really old, when basically he's trying to convince you to put down the book, but it keeps going on and on until it gets really boring, which is the point, but it goes a little bit too far, I thought. But my main criticisms are more the parts that I actually found offensive. There are a few little asides, like there's a racial slur against Romani people. I'm pretty sure there was a slur against little people. Most of all, though, the thing that really got to me, because it was a repeating elements in the first couple of books, is Count Olaf has one of his hench people is constantly described as so fat that they can't tell if it's a man or a woman. And you've got like the fat phobia in there, but mostly it just keeps making fun of the idea of how ridiculous it is that you wouldn't be able to tell if this person was a man or a woman. It really was so transphobic. It got to me, especially because like this is a series for kids, and you really shouldn't just be throwing in offensive sexist things. And it was also just a terrible writing decision, because, spoiler alert, they end up killing off this hench person, mostly because I think in the later books you get a little bit more of Count Olaf, and they couldn't have this person really be addressed by any name or referred to by a pronoun or speak. Luckily it's not in the later books, but ugh, terrible, unnecessary cis-sexist element to the books. Why? Especially because, like, I thought that it was being so progressive in its depiction of women, and then this. Anyway, that was my main criticism. So in the end, I finished this 13-book series, which I thought was going to get a little bit old by the time I got to the 13th book, but it actually left me wanting more, both in a little bit of a lack of closure way, but it also left me wanting more in the sense that I want to read more about this world and also more of Daniel Handler's writing. That was my review of A Series of Unfortunate Events. That was a lot longer than I was expecting it to be, but to be fair, it's 13 books, so really, this is a very short review. Let me know if you've read these and what you thought of them, and whether it would be one that you would want to read as an adult or one that you think is more just for kids. And thanks for watching. Bye!